Good day to you all. My name is Erwin Kiesler. I'm an engineer and I've worked and lived with my family at a Dutch salt mine at Stoupky in present-day Ukraine ever since the mine was started operating. The salt mine is named after Peter the Great, the enterprising Russian Tsar who in 1697 went to Holland in order to learn the art of shipbuilding. Since my retirement from work on the 1st of January 1910, I've taken on the job of bringing a little cheer to the people who still work here. Every morning I walk over to the office for a chat with my old colleagues and tell them the latest joke. This always goes down well, mainly because I get so much pleasure from doing it. Today, however, I have another pleasant task. I'm going to be your guide on a visit to the mine. Not the real one, that disappeared long ago, but a reconstruction based on the old photographs that have survived. Let's imagine we're flying in a hot air balloon over the site and descend at the east side where our tour begins. Here is the oldest photo that we have. It dates from late 1885. In front of you are the three railway lines which link the town of Bakhmut and the city of Kharkov. Close by is the station of Stoupky. In my time, it was little more than a halt, but for us at the mine, it played an important role for the salt transport. On the left, you can see the pithead building. The construction work on the mine has just stopped for the winter, and the personnel pose for a last photo. I knew a number of the people on it. There is the Russian engineer, D.K. Chernov. Without his geological research, the salt mine would never have existed. He also negotiated the contract for the land and was a shareholder in the mine. Also in the picture is our first director, C.M. Terevin, who was in charge until 1898. And if I'm not mistaken, young Dirk van der Made is there. He later moved to Dordrecht, where he became president of the Dutch company that owned the mine. Now we cross the railway and move along the south side of the buildings. You can see that the pithead building has now been finished. On the left of this photo, you can see the engine house. The cable which turns the great wheel is clearly visible between the top of the engine house and the top of the pithead building. You could call this the real heart of the mine. The steam to drive this equipment comes underground from the boiler house, a corner of which you can just see on the left. The smoke from the coal-fired boilers goes through underground pipes to the chimney. Ah, the chimney! Now that is a real piece of art. It's octagonal, not round in cross-section, and at a height of 30 meters, it ensured the smoke was blown high into the sky. That's one of the reasons I like to stroll around the mine. All of it has been so attractively designed. We've just walked to the west side of the pithead. This photo was taken in 1900 during the visit of two important persons from Holland. They were L.J. von den Steenhoven, the recently appointed president of the Dutch company, and N. Biesenfeld, the company secretary. Separated by Mrs. Paardekoper, wife of the mine director B.J. Paardekoper, who is third from the left. Two Russian colleagues, G.P. Kozyrev and D.I. Goncharov, are seated on the right of the photo. Behind the group on the right, you have another view of the chimney, the boiler house, and behind it, the pithead building. The building to the left is the salt processing mill, which is linked to the pithead building by a bridge. The wagons loaded with lumps of salt from the mine come across this bridge and are emptied into the grinding machines. Finely ground salt is put into bags for transport. Coarsely ground salt, for example for making glass, is loaded directly into railway wagons. Take a closer look at the edge of the mill roof with its little platform and cast iron stairway going down. From that platform you had a fine view over the whole site and the surrounding steppe, an ideal spot for taking photos. Now we can go down into the mine, but first we have a stiff climb to the top of the pithead building. When I was still working, I used to make that ascent every morning at 7 o'clock, whatever the weather. It was my job to make sure that the wheel, the pulleys and the lift were all in good working order. Thank you for making this climb with me. Are you feeling brave enough for the descent into the mine? Just to reassure you, the cable is replaced once a month, and that was done as recently as yesterday. Come into the lift. It's standing room only, though. Before we can go down, we have to wait for the bell to tell us that there is a load of salt on the way up. We're off. It's 200 meters to the bottom and the journey takes 2 minutes. That gives me just enough time to tell you one of my jokes. A mine worker is being interviewed for a job. The boss asks him if he is experienced. The man says he has years of experience. Where? Asks the boss. At Donetsk. How deep did you work? 750 meters. Good, says the boss. Just one more question, and if you give the right answer, you're hired. So, what sort of lighting did you have there? The man replies, I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. I only work the day shift. I'm sorry for going on like this, but in my experience, people like to have some distraction from the funny feeling you get from going up and down. Right, we're down now. Look around you. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything is made of salt. In fact, we're at the bottom of a prehistoric sea called the Perm Sea. The water gradually evaporated from the sea 225 million years ago, leaving a salt layer 20 meters thick. They say that if we mined the salt continuously for 25 years, we would only have got out 1% of the available salt. Take a look at what the miners are doing. They've bored holes in the salt, in which explosives are placed. Twice a day, salt is blasted from the salt wall. The lumps of salt are collected and loaded into wagons, which are brought up 2 by 2 to the surface. The miners are organised into teams of 10, each with a foreman, and overseeing the teams is a supervisor. Let's go above ground again and take a look at the houses on the site. Feels good to be in the open air again, doesn't it? We are standing on the top of the mill, where we have that fine view over the site that I mentioned earlier. There is a path from these houses to the pithead building. In the foreground is the office, and in the distance, the tall mouse tower, which I'll tell you about later. I lived with my family in one of the houses on the left of the photo, the one partially obscured by plum trees. My house was simple but comfortable. There was a porch at the front door to help keep out the winter cold when the door was open. I planted the plum trees when we first moved in. They continued to flourish despite the harsh winters. Oh, and Van Beuningen has included in this photo the incinerator, the gas light, and the underground ice store, which you can see from left to right in front of my house. Let's walk between the gardens to the mouse tower. The house got this name because its first occupant was my son-in-law, L.W. van den Muizenberg. On this photo, taken on a summer's day, we see the Van Beuningen family who later came to live there. From the attic window, you had a splendid view of the mine. Look how the chimney acts as a sundial. When the sun is in the west, you can actually tell the time from the position of its shadow. Halfway along the path to the mine, we see the first director's house that can also be seen on the oldest photo. The Scherer family lived there later, and the last occupants were Kees Marx and his wife with their 2 young daughters. Next to it is a second director's house. On the shady west side of this house, we see the family of my daughter Olga. Their last son, Gerard, was born soon after in Holland. Also on the left of the photo is Konrad Andrejevich, who helped them out in many ways. He was also a senior figure of a nearby village. In another portrait of the family, Olga is on the right with Theo in her arms. Both this and the previous photo were taken just before Olga and the children left for Holland. Olga had resolutely decided that the children should have a Dutch education. They all settled in the village of Blarikum, not far from Amsterdam. It was certainly quiet around here after they'd gone. Ten years earlier, a photo of the young couple Paardenkoper was taken at almost the same spot. I also want to show you the school which was built for the children of the local workers. On the photo, the building looks brand new. The next photo, the photographer has taken it from a position in the steppe. It shows the school and the houses further to the south. In the distance, you can just make out the town of Bakhmut. The school remained in use until the 1960s, latterly as an after-school centre for local children. We've wandered off to the north of the site. This is another early photo taken from the steppe. Everything is in place. There are no trees yet, but the explosive store is there on the right. This time, all the women and children have come out to be on the photo. If we turn slightly left to the east, we can admire the magnificent panorama of the whole site in its bare surroundings. There is the little 6 o'clock train to Kramatorskaya. On the right, you can still see something of Bakhmut. What a marvellous photo von Berninger has taken. After the Russian Revolution in 1917 and the Civil War that followed, times were particularly difficult for the remaining Dutch workers. They were forced to leave and sell the mine for 1 ruble to the Soviet authorities in 1920. In the 1930s, as a result of geological shifts underground, the mine workings filled with water, and the structures above ground collapsed into the mine shaft. So, Where once a century ago there was a thriving industry, there is nothing more than a pond with a flock of paddling geese. In the neighbourhood, however, salt is still mined, and there too they say, year in, year out, that the reserves are so enormous that only 1% of the salt has been extracted. Well, that was it. I have enjoyed being your guide, and thank you for listening to an old man's story. I hope you enjoyed it and can now appreciate how proud we were of our salt mine, Peter the Great. Finally, remember that these are my personal recollections, and so perhaps you should take them with more than just a pinch of salt. Farewell, my friends.